Amplified, 1510 AM WRRD. My name is Earl Ingram. I'm going to be part host of this special event this afternoon. And I want to thank all of those who made this possible. Tim Slecker, Busted Pencils Radio, Milwaukee Teachers Education Association, WEAC Region 7, Schools and Communities United. It's all right, you can clap. Citizen Action, AFT Local 212. Those of you who are listening via the internet and over the radio, you can still come out. We're going to be here from noon to 3, and it's at the beautiful Miramar Theater, 2844 North Oakland Avenue. I'm going to turn it over to none other than Miss Joanna Rosado.
Thanks, Earl. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Educators Amplified Part 4, the gubernatorial edition. My name is Joanna Rosado, and I'm a public school teacher and WEAC Region 7 member. I'm so thrilled to be joined today by hundreds of other public educators and their supporters here at the Miramar Theater on Milwaukee's East Side, as well as those out there listening and streaming in. We are all set to have a great show. The Educators Amplified planning team have identified 5 topics for candidates to respond to today. Candidates, we encourage you to be you and present your intuitive thoughts. We'd like to establish a rapport and an environment similar to a healthy classroom, where you will be seen, heard, and valued. We do not expect you to have the right answer. We'd like to engage you in real talk about real education issues with real public educators and advocates. We encourage you to interact with one another and with the questioner. So all of our questioners will be seated up here and coming up this way. And so truly, we encourage it to be conversational with each other and with us. So let's get right to it. I'm the first questioner. So I'll kick it off with the first topic, which is testing and standardization. Okay? Everyone know what that is? Well, you're about to find out. School accountability measures based on standardized test scores has been the only reform that education policymakers have been committed to for 20 years. The recently released NAEP scores indicate that even with this decades-long focus, scores remain flat. Do you believe we should continue test-based accountability, and why? Who wants to kick it off?
Why don't we just start with Tony?
Sure. And as state superintendent, I've been intimately involved with this topic for several years. And you're right, they're testing, weighing things regularly doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the right answer and that you're going to actually get at what schooling is all about. So am I a proponent of increasing testing? No, but I do believe that testing does serve a purpose. I think people need to think through on this topic of testing and standardization. The actual state test takes up very little of a student's time for an average third grader. I'm just talking about the state test. It's about an average of 1 day out of the school year. Now, is that 1 day important? It could be doing something else, absolutely. But what do we need to do, in my opinion, is we have to find a way to better, in our accountability system, better recognize and reflect what actually is going on in schools. That's a critical thing.
Thank you. I do want to hear from the other candidates, yes. But as a classroom teacher, I would say it's more than 1 day. Go ahead.
So, I think there is one thing that we can say about testing, which is that its greatest accomplishment has been sapping the joy from the classroom, taking away teachers' joy in teaching and students' joy in learning. And I think the parents hate it too. I know this is a mom and a stepmom of 4 girls, and if we want to understand what's happening in the classroom, testing gives us a very limited window. It's a picture of one type of assessment on 1 day, and we have put basically all of our eggs and all of our political capital into that one basket, and it's made some of the testing companies very, very wealthy. We need a much different approach that restores the teacher and the teacher's autonomy and professionalism to the classroom as the central way that we are going to evaluate students and how much they have grown over the years. I think that's the best thing that I can say. If you look at the scores overall, the NAAP scores, they've really been flat. But if you disaggregate them, what you can see is that there have been increases for upper middle class students, for white students, but for working poor students, for students of color, the scores have actually gone down. So obviously the path that we're on is not working and we need a divergent path.
Thank you. Yeah, feel free. You guys, this is interactive. You can clap, cheer, whatever.
I would have a couple of thoughts on this topic. First and foremost, my wife warned me, say Happy Mother's Day to so many of the teachers here. So let me start off by pandering a little bit. I have read the educational proposals of these two fine people. Now, I don't agree with what Kelda describes as tyrannical testing. I don't think it goes to that extreme. But the context of the question is about the NAEP testing. And if you look at, Alan Borsick wrote an article about 2 weeks ago, Marquette University professor, and the topic is the dismal NAEP scores. And to my reading of that article, actually it's down for whites as well. But most specifically, we've got the worst outcomes in the nation, disparately, for African Americans, especially at the 8th grade reading level. And here's what I would say. Whoever wins the primary and goes up against Governor Scott Walker, who currently is the champ, has to talk about educational outcomes. And Tony Evers is the superintendent of schools. And when Tony Evers took that job in 2009, the outcomes were disastrous. And when you look at the most current NAEP scores, the outcomes are disastrous.
Well, that's consistent, though, throughout the nation.
But other places are doing better, Joanna. You can do better than disastrous.
Well, and with school accountability, I think part of things we're asking people to think about is the reform that has been focused on is outcomes. And what we really need to be looking at are inputs. And student achievement has been defined as kind of like two things, a reading score or a math score. And as educators in the house, I'm sure I got my educators out here, we know that it's so much more than that in terms of, really narrowing what is student achievement.
Right, and that's what I was getting at with changing the accountability system so that it reflects more than just the tests. It doesn't reflect what goes on in schools every single day. And I think that will help drive the conversation, is what my point is.
Well, and so we only have a little bit of time left on this topic, but if you weren't to focus then on the outcomes, if we all agreed and we're like, yep, we need to move away from this way of defining achievement, what are some ideas you might have for where we could better spend that money? Because there's a lot of money being spent on school accountability.
Joanna, may I continue my response?
You guys conversate with each other. Do what you want.
Social emotional learning. It's being utilized in school districts right here in the state of Wisconsin. Brown Deer schools, about 1,600 students in cumulative. They've got a high school, middle, and they've got an elementary school. And they are using this, I believe, on the Castle model, and they're trying to reach kids where they are. And when you look at the outcomes, and I do think we have to look at outcomes. How do we not look at outcomes? But when you look at the outcomes at Brown Deer, they're starting to close those disparate gaps, and I think that they have made an investment. They call it the Brown Deer way or something of that sort.
Yeah, well, we hear about these things. Again, we're teachers out here. We can tell you the way, and it can't just be these programs that say those things. School accountability is really destroying our profession and destroying our classrooms. And we're looking for ideas and people to connect with that are willing to hear that and develop real solutions for us. Some of the things that we think about are like eliminating or working to eliminate at the national level the 3rd through 8th grade annual testing requirements, eliminating the required ACT for all 11th grade students in our state, And, continuing to revise the state report card and the accountability system to measure, again, more inputs than outputs. The reform focus for 20 years has been on measure, 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 measure. We've measured. We have these disparities. They continue to exist. By continuing to measure them, we're really not moving forward. And so we want you to consider that, and we want to bring up our next speaker with our next topic. So thank you so much. Yeah, it's Miss Tanya. And so really, you can look alive out here, everybody, and out there on the radio. I hope you're, chiming in, chatting in.
Hi, my name is Tanya Lohr, and I am a high school social studies teacher at West Bend West High School. My topic is going to be on the growing teacher exodus and the ill effects of dropping standards in teaching in order to address it. Wisconsin is experiencing a dramatic loss of educators due to bad working conditions, declining compensation, and loss of professional respect. Our current governor and legislature believe that the solution to the growing teacher shortage is to lower standards for entering and remaining in the profession, such that people can now become teachers in Wisconsin with absolutely no post-secondary education in teaching and no student teaching or other residency. What will you do to address the exodus of teachers from the profession and reestablish high standards for entering and remaining in the field of education?
Let's start with Kelda.
Thanks, Tanya, for that question. I think there has been some media coverage about how students are actually shifting away from education as a major. They don't want to pursue that as a career because they don't see a future in it. As a result of Act 10 and some of the other changes. But there hasn't been a lot of coverage about the retention issue, which I think is a real crisis in teaching, because we're not losing just potential teachers, we're losing teachers with years in the classroom, our most experienced teachers. And of course that has a tremendous impact on their would-be students, but also on the teachers who are going into the fields and don't have those relationships, those really important mentorship and professional development relationships that we need. So I think it's frankly offensive to say to teachers that it's actually too hard to become a teacher, and so we should just create a fast track, an easy way that you can check a box and become a teacher and go into the classroom. Teaching is a skill. It's a skill that is probably one of the most challenging that there is, and I say that as a lawyer. Like, I could become a lawyer like that. I don't think I could be a teacher. So I think we need to keep standards high, respect teachers, and give them the autonomy back into the classroom. Teachers are the professionals. They are the ones who should be making decisions about instructional methods, about curriculum. They should have a much greater voice in what goes on in the classrooms and in the broader schools than they do. And it shouldn't be politicians dictating what happens in the classroom or providing these alternative avenues, especially ones that might be fly-by-night private operations that really don't have the interests of students at heart, but they just want to make a quick buck.
Mike?
I would say Scott Walker has divided and conquered the state of Wisconsin. He made so many people in this room the villains. I would say that style of governance needs to end, and before you can restore Act 10, which I think is a necessary step, I know Kelda said, I don't know how you get there from here. Well, I can tell you, you got to start by putting that out as the vision. That's not exactly what I said. I said it depends how you get there from here based on the composition of the legislature and the outcome of the Supreme Court case pending right now. Speaking for myself, I think you got to put it out there as the vision. I think you have to start by restoring collective bargaining in the classrooms. I think you have to stand with the unions and stop treating our neighbors like they're our enemies. I think even Republicans, and I've got many Republican friends, they care about their kids too. They love their kids. They have voted in many cases to raise referendums and differing things. Well, if we all get it, that the teacher is the most vital part of this outcome, well, I think we need to start investing in the teachers, and we need to give them a say in the outcomes. And to me, that starts with Act 10. Now, Act 10 is a legal issue, and I've read the findings of the esteemed Wisconsin Supreme Court on that case, and I don't necessarily disagree with the outcome they arrived at. But part of governance is changing it. And changing it means if there is a quote-unquote blue wave coming, and if we have the governing doctrine, if we have that mandate, then it's time to roll back Act 10, and it's time to stand with teachers, and that starts with the vision, and that's Mike Crute's vision.
Tony?
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Anyway, we have to roll back several things that Scott Walker has done. And first of all is the ABCTE law that they passed. It's a diploma mill out of Georgia, where you just have to pay a fee and essentially you become a teacher. And I'll tell you, it makes me cry when we have to give licenses to those people because it's a joke. But we can roll that back. I don't think there's anybody in the legislature that will have thought that through. We will get rid of that law. I can guarantee you that. The other thing that we've done, and this is proactive, we can complain about all we want about the past, but I have been working on creating student organizations at the high school level called Educator Rising, which we're getting young people earlier and earlier thinking about the teaching profession. We have worked with our teachers across the state of Wisconsin with WEAC also to create teacher leadership summits where we bring people together and figure out ways to get better teacher voice in the profession. So we can do some things in some horrible times. I don't want anybody in the room to think that we aren't really working forward in some real positive ways. But there are some things that were passed in the legislation last time that we can get rid of. And the ABCTE, which actually gives on Black Friday, where we had all the sales, they actually had a sale on teacher licenses. Think about how obnoxious and horrible that is. We can change that, Tanya.
You have another question?
Nope. We have the next person with a question
All right.
coming up.
Good afternoon. I'm Marva Herndon of Women Informed and Schools and Communities United. And my friend here is Gail Hicks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gail Hicks. I'm a retired special education teacher. I've been retired for
Speak in the microphone, please. Thank you.
Sorry. I've been retired for 9 years, and I've been working pretty much advocating for the teachers that are still in the classroom for the past 9 years. And it's been really, really an experience. I am focusing on local control. Local control is something that Milwaukee definitely needs. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the K-12 omnibus. So my question to you guys is, the K-12 omnibus was put forth by Senator Alberta Darling and Representative New England. Neither of these people live in the Milwaukee area. I would like to know, what will you do to bring back local control to the communities and to Milwaukee? Don't everybody speak at once, please.
I think it's your turn.
I'd be more than willing to go first here. Local control has been under attack by Republicans for a number of years, and they always claim they want to govern locally, but of course they don't. I would say, you got to take back the governor's office, and that is the check at minimum. Even if you've got a gerrymandered assembly, you got to have at least one check man. You talk about special education. One of the most dastardly things I think the Republicans have done recently is to jam through special needs vouchers. I have a son who has an IEP, who has a diagnosis of autism. We've been very involved in this kid's treatment, care, education. I mean, there have been wonderful professionals that we deal with each and every year. But I can tell you these IEPs seem very aspirational in that I know the school doesn't have the resources now to do what we want them to do. And when someone like Leah Buchmer can encourage the governor of the state of Wisconsin to put special needs vouchers without public hearing in the budget, well, the problem is the governor in a big part, and the problem is the Republicans that feel that they're safely gerrymandered in their districts. So I think part of the change we need is people need to come out and vote and put new governance in place. But I would say to return local control, well, I would think most Republicans would also agree on that point, and I realize we got time constraints.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Either one of you can respond.
Okay, I'll just jump in here. The Republicans were the party of local control, and they decided that didn't work out for them, so that they became a state-controlled organization. And whether it's in licensing, whether it's in what goes on in the accountability system, all those things have been promulgated and put forward by the Republicans in order to take local control away. They think, for example, the school board in Milwaukee, they believe aren't doing the job, and the only way that's going to change is to foist more legislation onto them and changes. Now, I believe in local control. I think the city of Milwaukee should have more opportunities to raise revenue if they need it, and it's the mayor and others have been advocating that for years, and as governor, I will do everything I can to give the city and the county more options for revenue. We have extraordinary needs in all across the state, and if we keep taking those rights away from local government, we're paying a price in poor outcomes, whether it's education or any other arena.
Well, thanks, Gail, for the question. I think this is one area where there's a real opportunity for Democrats to get some Republican votes, because this is not just a Milwaukee problem. This is a problem that I hear about from township administrators and county boards folks in northern Wisconsin and some of the reddest areas of the state.
Okay, thank you very much. We're pushed for time, so we're pushing through this. I'm sorry. One topic we want to get to is voucher and charter schools, and the negative impact they both have had on MPS specifically, and the fact that the choice program has been expanded statewide. One of the big things is how it's funded. And MPS has to fund the voucher school students, pretty much. The Milwaukee taxpayers, it's part of your property taxes. The other thing is the performance is not there. The other thing is they leave in the middle of the night. What's worse is that MPS is also required legislatively to pay for yellow busing for voucher students at the same time. With the current budget cut, they're looking at cutting some yellow bus service to our own students. What would you do about that?
Marva, I want to start with this one, because this is one of the most important issues that our next governor is going to face. It's one of the most important budgetary issues, and there's a real difference amongst some of the candidates here. I have stated unequivocally that it is time for the voucher experiment to come to a close. We got to stop experimenting on our kids. All 4 voucher programs. And we're going to do it in a responsible way to make sure that kids are not displaced from their schools, but we are not going to continue pouring money into failed privatization efforts.
Thank you very much. Next person.
I have to jump in here. I have spent the last 9 years kicking out over 30 schools in the voucher program.
But is it true also that you don't have the powers to do very much? Because I work diligently in the community trying to monitor those, and what happens is we've been told by DPI that unless they're screwing up financially in some way, there's not much you can do.
Oh, absolutely, but if obviously voucher schools have not performed anywhere above the Milwaukee Public Schools.
So what would you do?
Marva, let me respond.
That's good, thank you. What I would do is we can't afford 2 or 3 publicly funded systems in the state of Wisconsin. We don't.
All right.
We cannot afford that. And second of all, this is an issue of local control. I am against the OSPP. That's all part of this issue, right?
That is correct.
Absolutely. So I'm against that. We need to stop the growth of the voucher system, and either the legislature needs to end it, or we need to make sure that we have funding for the public schools first. That's the bottom line in all this. This is around funding.
Okay. Thank you very much. Crute?
So many Saturdays ago that Tony Evers told me, or at least I listened to him on the radio from Coffee Makes You Black, said you can't throw these kids, you can't throw 30,000 kids out of the voucher schools.
Well, would you?
And I would say hogwash to that,
Would you
Tony.
throw them out?
I would not.
Would you throw them out?
Tony, let me finish.
Let's let
If
him
you would,
respond.
sir.
Then we'll let you come back, Tony.
No, I wouldn't throw them out. Tony, I'd roll it back over 4 years. You've been the DPI superintendent. What have you realistically done?
I've kept
to
over
stop
30
voucher
Tony,
schools?
let him respond.
Listen,
Do you want to win?
If you're going to
Tony,
spend your
Tony,
time,
Tony.
if you're going to spend your time attacking me, I get to respond to
Tony,
that.
let him respond.
Hey,
Okay, go
thank
ahead.
you. Sounds
So-
like there's some
Well,
real
let's-
things to talk about and figure
Do
out.
I
in
get to
terms
finish
of-
my response?
Let's let Crute respond.
You've got about 10 seconds.
I'll give you about 10. So I would end the Milwaukee the Milwaukee vouchers over 4 years. I would end the Racine and the statewide vouchers in year 1. I'd make it part of the gubernatorial budget.
All
If
right.
you don't fund it, it's not
Thank
going
you.
to happen.
Thank you so much. We're going to bring up our next guest. Our next speaker is from the technical school system.
Hi, my name is Sue Silverstein. I'm a welding instructor at Milwaukee
Why don't you
area.
lower the microphone? Pull it. Yeah, there you go.
My name is Sue Silverstein. I'm a welding instructor at Milwaukee Area Technical College, and I'm also an executive board member at AFT 212. Thank you. In the 2011-2012 budget year, Walker reduced funding for technical colleges by 30%. This brought the funding below 1988 levels. A less than 7% increase occurred in 2015, but that still left funding for technical colleges $66 million at shortfall. Additional burdens have been placed on students. Our students are making decisions about whether to buy food or gas, and so because of cuts in financial aid and loans and things that they have to deal with. The cost of providing free tuition for students who attend Wisconsin technical colleges would be $50 million per year. This is a small amount for success as compared to the $1.2 billion that was spent on state correction systems in 2017.
Yes.
So what is the question?
As governor, would you not only restore the funding to technical colleges that Walker cut, but also establish free tuition for Wisconsin high school graduates and adult students to attend the technical college system?
Kelda Roys.
Yes, I would, 100%. We are not going to spend more on prisons than we do on educating our students when I am governor. We also have to address the student loan debt crisis that is a millstone around the necks of generations of people, and we have to make it possible for people to refinance their student loan debt and prevent future debt from overtaking students.
Mike Crute.
Very aspirational, and I agree with Kelda Roys, but I'll pay for it. I'm going to legalize marijuana. I'm going to generate $200 million per year in new tax revenues. I'm going to take $100 million per year, and I'm not only going to fund free tuition for Wisconsin students, I'm going to expand, because you talked about the reduction in student aid. It's 31,000 people on the waiting list to get student aid for tech schools. So, with $100 million a year, half of the revenue generated from new marijuana tax, I would put the entirety of that amount towards a 2-year tech school, trade school, or towards basic studies, as long as they're utilizing the 13 tech school campuses in the UW system currently. And I would refund, or I would put sufficient funding into the financial aid, because school costs more than simply tuition.
With respect, there's actually a cheaper way to do it through the last dollar tuition credit that other states have used that will be at lower cost to taxpayers, and then we can use revenue for marijuana for other purposes.
Tony Evers.
We need to prioritize education, period, whether it's a University of Wisconsin system, the technical college system, or K through 12. It's around priorities. The state, under the Republicans, have given tax credit after tax credit after tax credit to wealthy individuals in the state, to corporations in the state, $5 billion at Foxconn. We do have the resources that we can certainly increase funding for our technical college system and the University of Wisconsin system. We have the resources now. We can do it. We have to do it. And we have a proposal, not necessarily to your two-year campuses, but in the University of Wisconsin system, to make tuition 50% of what it should be, or what it is now. We can do that at the technical college system without any problem. We have the money. We just prioritize it in the wrong place.
Your proposal is a $20 million proposal and is effectively a half step towards what she's talking about, is it not, sir?
Oh, give me a break, Crute. You just can't sit there and continue to jab your opponents.
I'm asking you specifically about your published policy, sir. You've got a $20 million proposal.
It's $11 million for the two-year campuses at the University of Wisconsin system.
And I know you talked about
and it'll be probably about a little bit more of that to get it to 50% tuition at the technical college system.
And I know you analogized the $22 million from 11 millionaires. Where do you intend to bring those funds from, Tony? Because that's not a specific proposal. That's a criticism of the governor's grandiose giving to donors.
I would end those tax credits. Mike.
All right, next question.
All right. Our next questioner is Ted Craig. Oh, there goes my alarm again.
Hi, I'm Ted Craig, and I am a parent of children in Milwaukee Public Schools, and I work for WEAC Region 7. And my question relates to the background for a lot of this. The percentage of students in Wisconsin who are economically disadvantaged has more than doubled since 2000. There exists an almost absolute correlation between poverty, family health, and other socioeconomic factors and the educational success of our children. Yet public schools are often blamed for disparities in educational outcomes. As governor, what would you push to dramatically reduce poverty and racial disparities in wealth and income so that all Wisconsin's children have the opportunity to succeed?
Let's start with Mike Crute.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm going to look at what the experts recommend, and the experts I'm looking at are at the University of Illinois. It's the CASEL model, CASEL, I believe. I would look at social, emotional learning. We got to go to where these kids are, Ted. And we can't keep doing it the same way we're doing it. As a small businessman, I believe in investing in infrastructure and people. And we've got to reinvest in our people, and that's back to giving them a collective bargaining voice. But, Ted, I think it's taking a different approach. And I'm not here. I've got some broad policy visions, and I know where I'd pay for my propositions from. But ultimately, I'm going to go to guys like you, and I'm going to seek the input of education professionals. Because as a politician or a small business guy, why would I be qualified to tell you, the education professionals, how you should do this? I'm going to look at what some studies say. I believe in science. I believe in best practices. But I'm going to rely upon education professionals to help guide my policy.
Well, the broader question, just to be clear, is what will you do to reduce poverty and racial disparities outside?
I'll take 20 more seconds. I think you've got to start by raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We've got to stop by expanding Medicaid, which is still available under Obamacare, and we have to stop villainizing poor people. We have to give them the resources, provide food for kids in the summer if necessary, during the school year if necessary, through community outreach, and that takes economic development and investment.
All right, Tony Evers.
Okay, Ted, as you probably know, I've proposed fair funding for our future plan for years. We are going to get that through. And the reason that's important around issues of poverty is that it weights kids that need an extra lift. That's the basic issue of equity is if kid needs an extra lift, they should get it, and it's going to cost more. We need to have things in our funding system that weights kids with disabilities, that provides additional resources for kids that are English learners, kids for poverty, the whole 9 yards. In Milwaukee, you would have $1,600 per student more right now with my plan. Bottom line. The second thing that's really important for us to think about is to make sure that we invest in early childhood in the poorest areas of this city and across the state. We have very few high-quality early childhood programs, and we can do that. Early childhood education is an investment. It's not a cost. It pays off at the end. We need more high-quality early childhood in our urban areas and rural areas where there is high poverty. And the third thing, we have to fix our correctional institutions that sends poor people to prison with that Frankly, white people are not sent to prison. They have means. We need to keep people out of the prison system, and that will also create jobs or get people to work and have less poverty.
Kelda Roys, please.
So, of course, we have to address the funding inequities in our schools, but the question is really about the community. How are we going to end poverty in our community that has been persistent and generational based on the divestment of resources? We need recommitment to ensuring that every single child, no matter which zip code he or she is born into and how much his or her parents make, is going to have access to universal early childhood education that is a public good and publicly funded, that their schools are well funded, that they have adequate safe housing, that their parents have enough income, whether it's from public source or from a job, that they can actually raise that child and not in poverty. And so that's a combination of increasing public resources and specifically in communities that have been neglected and underinvested in for decades, and making sure that the private sector does its part and raising our minimum wage so that it's a living wage, and freeing communities like Milwaukee to set their own policies for workers so that there can be living wages in those communities, and addressing issues like housing and childcare that are huge costs for families that are, as Tony said, it's an investment in our future when we make that possible for every single child. Please check out my website for a much more detailed program.
Joanna?
I'm just listening, and a lot of what I'm hearing, is great, and yet a lot of it sounds the same. And and I'm thinking of all the topics right now. And yet, as an educator, what I keep is I keep hearing about a lot of things, but I'm not feeling or seeing anything. And so that's part of what our forum is that we kind of want this exchange, right, of Educators Amplified in particular is this show to say we want educators' voices to come out and explain what is happening. Because in every group I'm a part of, I really hear everybody telling us what the priorities are and what would be good. And so, that's to everybody here. That's part of this exchange. So I do really appreciate hearing all of your ideas. And I think we have a few people from the crowd that are going to ask some questions. We're going to have to keep that really limited. And then we're going to allow you each to give a 1-minute closing that is why would or why should educators vote for you? So we have a questioner?
Quickly, be brief.
My name is Andy Kugel. I teach at Sussex Hamilton High School. We keep hearing about educational professionals. You're going to get advice from educational professionals. I'm an educational professional as a teacher, and it seems like the educational professionals who are always truly asked are district administrators or superintendents, never the teachers. So how will you listen? So how are you going to listen to the teachers? Because we're the ones on the front lines.
Okay, we got it. Let's begin with Tony. Tony?
Sure. I meet with a group of teachers that are advising me. There's about 35 of them. We meet about 4 or 5 times a year, and they're from all across the state of Wisconsin, including southeast Wisconsin. And we lay out items for them to respond to. We give them updates. So we do that right now. WEAC needs a bigger voice. I will tell you that. Organized labor being constrained is a problem as far as listening to teachers, but we have a group of teachers that
Thank you. I'm sorry.
every year.
Kelda Roys?
I, too, do that right now. I have a lot of teachers who are supporting me, and I listen to them, and they are the ones that help me craft my policies. And as governor, I will restore collective bargaining rights and give teachers back that voice in the workplace, and make sure that they are at the table for every decision that we are making about our schools.
Crute?
I would be quite honest, most of my insights as a white guy who lives on the west side of Madison, most of my insights into what's going on in this community with Milwaukee Public Schools have come through the Earl Ingram Show, have come through Busted Pencils and Tim Slecker. So I built a platform for that. And I'm trying to listen to what these educators have to say. And granted, it's radio, but radio is my portal into what's happening in MPS schools. I can go into the communities, but Earl lives here and has been for the last 63 years. Earl's got his finger on the pulse. So when the professionals come to Earl, and Earl's a hell of a host, that's how I hear about what's happening in the classroom.
So something I really like is if you do become governor, don't ask administrators to pick the teachers.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, so let's end it. Tony, what do you want to say in closing?
Father Tom Miller, what would you do?
We're out of time. I'm sorry. Tony, what do you want to say in closing?
And really, our closing question could be responding to anything out here, or why should educators vote for you?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for inviting me today. This is a really important race for governor. Obviously, we can win this race. And as an educator, I've represented educators all across the state for the last 9 years. And I take that oath very seriously to listen to educators. And have we had some wins? Yes, we have. Have we had some losses? Absolutely. The Republicans are in charge. But that's one of the reasons I'm running for office. We have to make sure that we're changing the dialogue around education in the state of Wisconsin. That is exceedingly important. And the good news is I actually get to appoint my successor for the last 2 years of my term. So we're going to be able to keep good people in the office.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Kelda Roys.
Thank you. My name is Kelda Roys, and I am running for governor because I want to restore opportunity and fairness to the state. I want to make it the best place to raise a family and the best place to build a business, and that means being the best place to raise children and having great schools. The best way to get great schools is make sure that educators have the autonomy and the respect and the resources in every single classroom in this state. I am very concerned about the privatization, and I have come out strong on my website, keldaforgovernor.com, about how we are going to not just end the voucher programs in the state, but also attack the privatization that's happening with charter schools. We haven't gotten a chance to talk about that, but there's some real differentiation among the candidates, and I encourage you to see what my plans are. I asked for your vote on August 14th and again on November 6th, and I hope that I can earn your partnership because you will have no stronger voice in the governor's mansion than I have, just like when I was in the assembly and I stood up for you during Act 10 and saving the 4-year-old kindergarten grants that were on the Democrats' chopping block. I have been with teachers every step of the way, and you've been with me from the beginning, too.
Thank you. Mike Crute.
My name's Mike Crute. You can find my website at Crute for Wisconsin. I was an orphan, and when my mom died, teachers became my mentors. And I have been educated by some wonderful people. Miss Kleibander comes to mind. My 4th grade teacher has an effect on every day of my life. So I respect the profession and the people here. And I can tell you, to govern in the state of Wisconsin, first you got to beat the champ, and that's Scott Walker. And I just find it hard to believe that someone that's on the Read to Lead board with the current governor, a board that has not met in over a year, according to Senator Chris Larson just the other day, how you can distinguish your policies when Governor Scott Walker can turn around and say, hey, Tony, we've been in this together. And I would ask for all of these candidates to put specific funding proposals, not just aspirational thoughts, but specific funding proposals forth, because I have specifics and I would lead with specifics, but I would certainly seek the input of the teaching professionals, because I respect your profession quite a bit.
Thank you very much, Mike. And we want to thank you candidates for coming up. Give them a round of applause.